Welcome to our newest adventure for first responder wellness. No one fights alone. In depth conversations about mental health and culture in the first responder space. We're joined by your co hosts Austin Pedersen and Brad Shepard.
Austin, it has been a hot minute since I've seen you on here. We skipped last week. I will be the first to apologize to our listeners for letting them down of not posting an Austin and Brad conversation. So to the listeners, we apologize for that. But man, it's good to see you.
Absolutely, dude. I love how we hype up just you and mine's conversation, and then we just
Right? It's like going in the ring. It's like woohoo!
yeah, and then just totally bail out on it. Don't say anything on social media. Don't let anyone know. We just continue life like it was just normal. Yeah.
Well, for me personally, these are fun. I enjoy these. These ultimately, well, we have gained some momentum with this, and for my my little learning how to do this podcast work, it's these end up being fun every time
Oh
I
yeah.
get on this with you. We end up chasing a rabbit down a hole that ends up being pretty fun.
Oh yeah.
So
Well,
where you been, bro?
man. First off, I do have to say it is fun. We even got old Ben Pearson to say that he liked doing it, and if you can get him to like doing more work, then it must be fun, right?
That was good.
Yeah.
That was a good one too.
Yeah.
He's so smart.
Oh, absolutely. But last week was interesting, man. I was in California. I went to a conference. It was for family stuff, but the majority of the conference was focused on patient safety and what hospitals do, how they treat people. Found some staggering statistics, and so these are all available via Google, so it's nothing new here. But I think I told you the other day, man, it was crazy. 1 in 4 patients that go into the hospital are actually injured by the hospital while they are there in one way or another.
That's that's that leaves me a little bit speechless, actually.
Staggering.
Say that number. Say that number again.
Yeah,
One,
one in
one
four.
and four.
At 25%, right? That is a very scary statistic because that is so high. You got to think how many people are in a hospital at one time. 25% of them are getting injured by the hospital.
By the hospital. So I'm sure that ranges from anywhere from a accidental, oopsie to doing like irreversible damage, irreversible damage or death. I mean,
Yeah.
that's probably all encompassing. But I read a book I've referred to a couple times here, but Matthew Walker's book, Why We Sleep. He references in there that the medical community is so sleep deprived that the data proves that they've had a significant impact on the patient care as a result of that sleep. And so, I guess all in all, I mean that's there is some crazy things going on out there about our medical community. So, how was was there any positives that came out of the conference?
Oh yeah. I mean, so the cool thing was is there were doctors from across the world. I mean, from some of the best medical care systems in, Europe to,
Oh
some
wow,
underfunded Latin American doctors. So it was cool to see what different countries are doing, some with universal health care, some with not. And the main thing, I mean, the goal of this conference was to help that number go to zero. That's the reality. That's what that conference is
sure.
there for, is to help people realize and bring to light some of these stories and some of these statistics and some of the things that are happening. So but the thing that I thought was the most interesting was, and I think that this is with anything, right? It doesn't have to be with the healthcare system. It can be with a retail clothing store. But the more money you spend on systems and backups and fail safes, the less money that you actually have to spend on mistakes. So there was a statistic in there, and this guy was a German doctor that flew in, and he basically said that, here's the cost per client if we're going to take this into money, right? And the average cost was something like $23,000 per stay. And that's for everyone's, paychecks, insurance, rent, whatever. $23,000 per stay. That's a staggering number as well. But when it was included in a mistake, it was something like, $44,000 per client. And then he made that difference in, okay, if we spent X amount of dollars on fixing the system in each hospital, you're actually spending less money than you would on the mistake.
Of course. I mean, it makes sense. Got business owners doing that out there, but man, that's a huge elephant to eat right there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it was wild. I mean, people's eyes get real wide when they see like the actual numbers in front of them. It's a scary statistic, but it just proves though that when you try and not spend as much money on people to try and make it so that you can save pennies, right? If you spent the dollars, you save drastically more.
You're doing it
That's
right.
life. Yeah, that's life. You're doing it right. Yeah,
Doing it right.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was weird. It was definitely one of the times in my life where I felt very stupid comparatively to the people in this room. Yeah, and it
There's just
was
smart people in there, huh?
it was probably a collection of the smartest people that I've ever been in. 100%.
Yeah.
Like you could just it's different conversations, it's different interactions. I mean, it was it was cool to see like a different population how they interact socially because we like got to go to dinners and other stuff and interacted with some of the people there, and I'm like, this is a different breed of person. Like these people are all so driven, so incredibly smart, and I felt dumb.
I feel that a lot. I feel that a lot. I'm okay with that. That man, what a privilege to get to be a part of something so cool.
Yeah, and it
'Cause
wasn't work
this
related.
wasn't just your average California conference. You're saying this is a worldwide event
Yeah, there was people
hosted.
from the World Health Organization, the FDA. I mean, there was everything under the sun when it comes to taking care of people's health. There was a representative there for it.
That's awesome.
But
Well, I'm
anyway,
glad you got to go out there. I think uh, I think we both just segued into a good uh, lead for our topic today, which is negative self-talk. I think you and I both just I slammed that one home on purpose a little bit. Uh, I like I like self-deprecating talk, um, but it hadn't been that long ago. Matter of fact, it was just a couple weeks ago. I was hearing somebody talk about self-deprecating talk can actually have a reverse um, effect on several different things. But what we're going to talk about today is the impact that it has on on the person in the mirror, how the negative conversations that we have with ourselves um, impact us on our daily day life.
yeah, it is. This is also another staggering number is that I read somewhere where, first off, there's like 25% of people that actually just do not have a voice inside of their head. Like they don't think and they don't hear a voice the way that some people do, right? And um, the people that have that actually suffer less from depression, anxiety, all of those other things because they don't have that inside voice telling them like, "What are you doing?" Like,
They don't play golf.
yeah, yeah. Well, don't get me started on negative self talk with golf.
No,
That is a
but that's a crazy statistic. 25% of people out here walking around don't have an inner voice
yep,
that tells them you just fucked that up.
yeah,
You're going to mess this up. Your mom hates you.
mm-hmm. And
They don't have that conversation.
yeah, no, not at all. And they actually suffer less than people like yourself and myself that are telling ourselves that we're pieces of shit if we ever make a mistake.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah, for sure.
but to the other 75% that are sitting there with this voice, right? A lot of this stuff, this negative self talk, really impacts us, and it starts in childhood, right? Like we make these beliefs about ourselves in whether we're unattractive or unintelligent. There's a mole on our face that we don't like. It can be anything. And we start at a young age telling ourselves that, this is our, bad characteristic, or this is what makes us ugly, or things like that, right?
I saw an Instagram reel that was a little exercise in humanity where they put makeup that distorted the physical form of a person's face, and they prepped them to go into an interview, and they let them look in the mirror, they let them absorb it and receive the distortion of their face, and then right before they interviewed, they said they wanted to touch it up, but they removed it. And when they went in the interview, they came out claiming bias on all the interviewers. The interviewee said, "Oh, they were completely biased to my disfigurement."
Hmm.
And I think that's a great example of what we tell ourselves, that we're not worthy, or we can't do this, or there's something wrong with us. I think, just a little Instagram reel, but I found it very fascinating to think, yeah, I could see that. That would resonate loudly, that, there's something wrong with me. I'm disfigured, or something wrong with me. I can't do the job.
Yeah. And then you look at the opposite end of that, and you look at leaders, CEOs, executives, those type of people. There's not a lot of negative self-talk there. There's a deep
Hmm.
belief in themselves and their skills and their abilities to succeed. And I mean, that's obviously far end of the spectrum, right? The people that are really suffering, whether it's, physical or mental. And then the ones that are almost to a point narcissistic, right? Like, I think there's can't remember the exact number, but there's also a pretty high percentage of these high end CEOs and executives have these narcissistic personality traits in order to be that successful and have that much drive and believe in
Sure.
themselves that much. But then there's people in the middle like you and me, right? Like, I will tell you, my negative self talk is brutal.
I get caught in that loop. I feel like it's a little bit of a loop for me personally. It's a feed loop of, I say something negative about myself, so I bring it to truth,
Hmm.
which feeds into the same conversation I have tomorrow, which I bring it to truth, which feeds into, well, you're not worthy. Okay, I'm going to act like I'm not worthy. And then I'm going to tell myself, well, you're not worthy because you didn't act worthy today. So it's that cycle of sorts. And yeah, for sure. That had a huge impact on my, my alcoholism, and why that was one of the things that Chateau showed me was, who are you? What is your, recentering me back to my beliefs of who am I? And, I'll tell that story in a minute of the self worth piece, but that was a major change for me, um, of recognizing that Stacy and his magic, his voodoo with, the Knight in Rusty Armor piece.
Hmm. That Night and Rusty Armor piece is all that inner child work, man. It's
Yeah.
all that work of you are worthy, right? A huge piece of that workshop in particular is about being worthy to yourself. We focus a lot on the negatives, and whether it's mistakes or, whether it's our past, shame, guilt, all of those type of things. When we're stuck in that negative self-talk mode, we actually don't allow ourselves to validate anything that we do well, whether it's being a good
Mm-mm.
husband, wife, father, mother, employee, any of those type of things. We don't allow the positive pieces to come in. And that's the part that takes a lot of work, right? Because you can't sit there and dwell on those negative pieces. You have to allow your successes to come in and overpower those negative self thoughts.
That reminds me of Brene Brown. I was listening to one of her TED talks about uh, some of this, and the conversations that we have internally that prevent us from actually embracing and leaning into joy, which is that being vulnerable piece.
Hmm.
And we block that by just, anticipating the bad, or having conversations internally within ourselves of, you're not worth that, you don't deserve that, you're not going to have that. It's just not going to happen. I mean, all these conversations that are just at times paralyzing. They just and not a physical form of paralysis, but an emotional, mental, spiritual paralysis of, okay, I can't move. I'm just going to go to work every day robotically, and this is my lot in life. You know,
Yeah, well, you succumb to that. That's the thing is
sure,
after so long of feeling a certain way, it is now just I'm going to feel this way for the rest of my life, and that's that. And sometimes, a single therapy session per week or bi-monthly or whatever it is not going to help you overcome that, right? A lot of people, when we're going back to some of these therapy sessions, is they go into a therapist's office and they tell them about these negative beliefs, right? And then the therapist gives them tips or tricks or tools to help them overcome that, but then they don't ever actually use them. They just,
yeah.
they
The
go on with their
application
life.
is lost.
Yeah, because this takes a lot of work. And I think that, being a cog in this giant world machine, you can feel like an ant sometimes, right? Like you feel like an insignificant person in the world, in the grand scheme of the world. And we tell ourselves that's where my self thought, well, it's where my negative self-talk started, really, is me just thinking I'm insignificant and that what I do doesn't matter. And the people that care or love about me don't actually really care or love about me. I'm just kind of there and I'm a burden to everyone else, right?
Okay, so we were bantering a little bit before we hit the record button on this. What's the fucker's name that talks to you inside your head?
Oh, dude, I already forgot his name.
Bill.
Yeah,
You told me it
Bill.
was
There
Bill.
we go.
So
Yeah.
Bill,
Yep.
I just got renamed at my workout place, and so I think I'm going to adopt that same philosophy. They renamed me Marv. Said Marv is the that's a good name for the guy up in my head that I'm going to dismiss frequently and say, yeah, I think it's important to actually identify that as to what it is, because we can get into this rut of listening to this, and we convince ourselves that there's a reality to it, and you know there's a uh, there's a clear um, differentiation between uh, how you're going to externally exhibit yourself and portray yourself if you're talking positive versus talking negatively in your head. It's just the reality of it. So, for me, I think um, going back to that Knight in Rusty Armor piece, that taught me a ton um, about recognizing, holy shit, I've been having these conversations in my head a long time, that I'm not worthy. And to your point, the here's the tools. Recognition is only part of the process. Gaining the tools is only a small part of the process. But every day having these conversations with yourself about, no, that's not true. I'm actually worth something. No, that's not true. I'm meant for something. No, that's not true. I am loved. I am worthy. I'm chosen. Um, these are all things that I still practice today. It's part of my journaling in the morning.
Yeah. And that's so to give a brief background there. We were joking around reading one of the blogs that I had put out about negative self-talk, and that's kind of how this whole conversation started. And so I was doing research on some of the tools to properly deal with this because it's so common, right? I think anyone that has that inner voice has some kind of negative self-talk, right? And one of them is give your inner critic a nickname. And then this will help to dissociate negative thoughts and feelings from you, as well as give you some control over the situation. It can also be helpful to talk to yourself out loud like you would a friend when giving your inner critic a nickname. And when I was doing that and researching that, I'm like, that doesn't fucking work, right? And then actually doing it and joking about it and giving him the most ridiculous, basic white dude name that I could possibly come up with. it lightens the situation, right? Like, it makes us laugh at these kind of things. Because if I had that dude, Bill, talking to me, and all I can think in my head is like, "Shut up, Bill. You know what you're talking about. Like, come on." That's the kind of things that come to mind, right? And that's actually healthy, right? Like it actually works. And I was looking at tips thinking this one's kind of ridiculous, but then we apply it, and I'm like, oh wait, it actually works.
It actually does work. And I think one of the other tips that in the blog that you have posted on there that you wrote on there was treat that conversation, the voice, like you would be having this conversation with a friend. I've used this many times with people, and I've since used this with myself. Um, if I had a friend talking to me like that, would I listen to them? Number one, and would I put up with it? I mean, that's not a very good friend that would sit there and whisper in your ear all day, every day that you're not worthy and you're not going to amount to anything or whatever those conversations that people have in their head. Mine was worth shame and guilt, and I wouldn't tolerate that from a, a friend. I wouldn't accept that language. I wouldn't accept that. You can go fuck yourself.
Yeah.
um but we tolerate that internally in our head.
It's wild what we allow ourselves to say in our head comparatively what we would say to someone else, right? If so this is critique the question, right? That's one of the tips as well, which is like ask yourself for some evidence based ideas of why this is true, right? So you know if a friend came up to me and said I'm a piece of shit, I'd say here's 15 reasons why you are an amazing human being. Here's why we're friends. Here's why I love you. Here's why your family loves you. Here's how your work or your profession, they depend on you. Here's how your children depend on you. Here's what you do on a daily basis for others. But we don't allow that, right? We don't critique our own head when they say I'm a piece of
Mhm.
shit. In my head I go, yeah, that sounds pretty good.
Yeah, I could.
Yeah,
Yeah, I could handle that. You're probably right.
yeah. Well, let's just leave it at that and move on.
Thanks, Bill.
Yeah, right. And that critiquing portion, right? Like I'm a very logic based thinker, which is why spirituality was really difficult for me for a long time. But that makes so much sense to me. So if I'm yelling at myself, right? If I make a mistake and I'm like, okay, I'm a piece of shit. Well, okay, so you made a mistake. So let's go in deeper. What else? What makes you, do I treat others poorly? Do I hit my dog or whatever, right? Like if we're going that far, right? You can ask yourself and critique and really figure out very quickly that there's a lot more evidence towards the opposite. And if there isn't that evidence, then maybe, what you need to do is go talk to your therapist and figure out what you're doing and how you're behaving and if you're aligning with your values.
Yeah, I think there's a important piece and component here that um, not all this can be corrected just from internal thinking and changing a mindset. There are aspects of um, trauma and various other things that actually are so impactful that they'll actually reframe and rewire the brain to a negative or depressive state, and that requires some type of therapeutic modality. EMDR, I know, is a great one for survivor guilt.
Mhm.
That which survivor guilt ultimately is I coulda, shoulda, woulda done something different if only, you know, it would have been me, or I could have been there, or, whatever the fill in the blank is there. EMDR does a great job of tempering that to where it lessens the impact of the event on you to where you can actually therapeutically process, okay, that ultimately may or may not have been your fault, but we're going to deal with the reality of it. I think also from a so social media. I think social media plays a part in this. I think I don't think we should let social media off the hook in this conversation. I think you get on there and cruise around and I wish I was that, or I wish I was there, or why
Mhm.
can't I have that, or the news this, or there's a. I feel like there's a. It's almost a spawn of something evil on there trying to separate people to where they feel disconnected more than they ever have, and I don't know. I'm not an expert in the field, but I know you get off of social media and you're like, holy cow! I just want to go step on a nail or punch myself in the face.
Yeah. Well, and this is something I'm going to go back to the beginning of that statement and say the negative self talk for me absolutely was a therapeutical intervention that helped me overcome those negative self beliefs. Right now,
Sure.
there's a kind of continuous work on it, right? Like you always have to be working on it and trying to better yourself because those negative self thoughts are always going to appear in one way or another. Whatever in life happens, it's natural for me to have that. And without the work that I've done, mental health wise, I would not be able to overcome those. Those would still control my life on a daily basis, like they did for a decade. So, hitting on that, yes, therapeutical interventions are incredibly important in this. There's some tools that we said earlier, but that may not be able to crack kind of that vault at first, and you may
Hmm.
need a
Right.
therapist or someone close to you, a spiritual advisor, chaplain, whatever it may be, to help get that through to that at first.
Sure.
Now we're going to go down the rabbit hole of a social media. So I'm gonna. This is a real story, but I'm gonna make up his name. We'll call him Mike. Mike lives a pretty good life, right? And he's a friend of mine, works in this field, and Mike has a great house, great family, bunch of kids, dog, everything, right? On the surface, it appears that they have, the 2.5 kids, white picket fence life, right? Well, Mike's wife is addicted to social media. Now, she loves looking at celebrities, loves looking at, the high life, right? What all these people are doing that she is now missing out on. So what it has caused is and this can be on the male or female side, just happens to be a
Sure. Of
female
course.
here because I happen to know this person and it's
N-
that story's coming up in my head. But
No one's off limits.
yeah, and it's caused tension in their marriage because she believes that they should have more. They should be doing more. They should be, out every weekend on these trips and going these fancy places, these hikes, these fishing, whatever. And it's caused tension in their marriage. He's going, leave a pretty good life. Like I work 40 hours a week. Supply for my family financially. She works. She helps financially. Like we have a pretty great life. Now, they have not been able to overcome this challenge yet. They're working on it. His mindset is all this social media stuff is fake. Like they're, the Instagram versus reality kind of reels that they do, right? Where they
Hmm.
show like only the best parts of whatever thing they're
Oh,
doing,
sure.
or
Yeah.
they zoom out on the photo and it's actually like a crowd of like 10,000 people around them and they just happen to be the one there. But then there's also her side where he probably needs to feed that need for her, right? As well. So there's
Sure.
both sides are possibly they need some work done. But I don't think that this was an issue 15 years ago, right? Like this is a relatively new argument in relationships, which is like I'm seeing all these other people. There's always keeping up with the Joneses, but to this extent, it is pretty new and it's damaging.
So that's a whole nother uh yes, a rabbit hole there. I'm currently reading a book. It's taken me a bit to get through it, but it's called The Comfort Crisis, where there this person's perspective is our discomfort, our comfort is becoming a discomfort because we're not happy. We're not satisfied. There's no joy, and we've been given luxury and leisure items to do this. And I think one of the things that he draws out in that is that we now have the ability to look left and right and say and compare our lives to somebody instead of actually existing right here in this moment and say, I've got it pretty good.
Hmm.
I've got food, I've got shelter, I've got clothing, I've got somebody who loves me, I've got a family. these are all things that are really good. Within that book, he talks pretty consistently about um, we just continue to elevate and escalate the standards by which we think we should be living. Um, when and his argument to culminate into the book, and I haven't quite finished it yet. It's awesome, awesome book. But he's basically saying, "Hey, shut your mouth and get outside.
Mhm.
Go do something hard. That will give you a better perspective on the reality of what's going on in your life." And as to this point of the book, we haven't talked about gratitude, but I know personally, I do a lot of gratitude stuff, and that changes my perspective so often when I just say, you know what, I appreciate what I have instead of looking over there and seeing what I don't have.
Well, this goes, I mean, California is a great example of this. As I was there, we went to the beach one night. And, I would say probably there was anywhere from 50 to 100 people really making their experience centralized on their social media. You could just kind of see whether it was videoing or photography or whatever, right? And then you had a certain group of people really enjoying the moment and being present and talking and conversating with people. And it was a very stark difference in those two different groups. And to me, it looked like the people that were present and enjoying conversation were having a little bit more fun because the social media influencers were really jumping here and there, getting a different view or what, spending a lot of time getting that done. But it made me think, right? And it made me understand that like I don't have to live up to what these people are doing because I'm seeing behind the scenes. I mean, I live in Utah. We don't get as many people doing that as in California. But it was very stark to me that like I'm going to sit and enjoy this moment because I don't want to be doing that. I don't want to make it look like I'm having a great time when I can just have a great time.
There is a stark difference. There is a vast difference between the perception of and the reality of. And for today, I think kind of wrapping this up. If you were to say, a lot of these negative self talks that consume us, what would be Austin's take on, how we? What's the simple version of how we keep Bill quiet? How do you keep Bill quiet?
Man, I stay present. Really, that's a huge one for me because I'm a future tripper. I really am. I don't, I think a lot about the future and what issues there may be. I stay present and I stay grateful. Those the
Yeah.
gratitude lists, man, for me are amazing. If I ever get down, those are things that work with me. Like I said earlier, go to a therapist if you're really struggling with this and work on that first and overcome that first hurdle. But then it's the simple things.
Sure.
I mean, there's so many studies behind the mindfulness practices that say that this is just one very simple and easy way to have a sense of joy and happiness is to stay present and to stay grateful.
Which, when you say it like that, it sounds really easy. It's actually really difficult.
Super
So I
hard.
admire how how you say it because you make it real. You make it seem very tangible, which it is. It's just hard. It's hard to actually live in the moment of just existing with, what you have in front of you and around you. And I think the most, probably the most relevant to that being present is when you're with a loved one. Do you have the ability to actually be present, love them, exchange energy for energy, words for words, hear and acknowledge back in a good conversation? And oftentimes we're that's really that's really hard sometimes. You know, when your mind's taken off, and what should I do tomorrow? And I got to cut the grass, I got to pay that bill, and being present is a big deal. So I appreciate that, and I too, gratitude's a big piece for me. I oftentimes I just had a conversation today with a first responder up way up north. I said, man, have you tried this? Um, so you need to try this. You need to have this conversation with yourself and with your loved one. Sit down with your wife and practice this gratitude. I guarantee you, I would be shocked if it didn't make your marriage better.
Absolutely.
simply because you're actually just engaging in a practice together of being grateful. You're aligning. So,
Yeah.
yeah, great topic, man.
Yeah. And this is the thing I want to leave it on is nobody taught us how to be present and nobody taught us how to be grateful. That was not in our society for people growing
Yeah.
up, right? That does not mean that you can't do it. It just takes a lot of work and a lot of practice. 10,000 hours makes somebody perfect or somebody a master, right?
Well, and I also think it doesn't mean you can't hustle. I
Yeah.
mean, there is something to be said for just getting out there and working and working hard, but that doesn't e- equate or deserve negative self talk. Getting out there hustling, working, and saying, "Hey, I got to do this and I got to do all these things," doesn't have anything to do with planning. That's all. That's all different. Those are different topics.
Yeah. All right, my friend. Thank you. I appreciate the
Hey,
time.
good visit.
Thank you for listening to this segment of No One Fights Alone. No One Fights Alone is sponsored by
Chateau Recovery is a 16-bed treatment facility nestled in the foothills of the Wasatch Mountains in Midway, Utah. Chateau's First Responder Resiliency Program is designed to treat the unique challenges and issues that first responders encounter in the course of their careers. Chateau's comprehensive and highly individualized approach to treatment addresses more than just the presenting issues. It addresses the why. Each of their seasoned, trauma-trained, and culturally competent therapists utilize evidence-based, specialized therapies to treat trauma at its core and enable clients to begin the healing process while developing a resilient and healthy relationship with stress. Chateau Recovery is trusted by departments and agencies from around the country to treat responders and veterans. In fact, it is one of only a handful of facilities nationwide that is vetted and approved to treat members of the Fraternal Order of Police. For more information or to speak to a representative, go to chateaurecovery.com or call 888-507-5031.
No One Fights Alone is also sponsored by First Responder Trauma Counselors. First Responder Trauma Counselors are subject matter experts in proactive behavioral health care for frontline workers through their National Peer Support Academy. This 40-hour all badges, all uniforms, and all scrubs educational experience helps to create caring, honest, and empathetic peer support relationships with your fellow frontline workers. The FRTC National Peer Support Academy is taught by actual first responders who have gone back to school to become culturally competent, licensed behavioral health clinicians that teach from lived experiences, not just theories from books. This fast-paced, immersive educational academy will not just change your life, it will help you save the lives of others. For additional details, visit 991overwatch.org or call 970-222-419-3. This could be the most life-changing academy you'll ever attend.